I will call the meeting to order at meeting number 1613. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. Can you hear me? All right. Before we begin, I would like to say a word about Ginnis. This flower arrangement in front of me is Ginnis in our presence. Her vibrancy, her beauty, what she brought to our committee. I am hoping that she stays with us and guides our work. She left us, she gave us her spirit, honesty, respectful attention to others, modesty, empathy, and number one, high regard for the children that we are trying to educate. So here she is. I'm keeping her alive for me, and I hope we all remember what she gave us. All right. So now we have to do our business with our sadness. I'm going to move a couple of items. The student spotlight will be coming up front. And after that, we will, yeah, I'm just gonna, okay, we first get a motion to move the student spotlight to number 1.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, any discussion? I'll do a roll call vote. Carrie Ann?
Yes.
Bonnie? You still there?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Art?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Jane? Yes. Can I do the other motion too, or do I do that?
Kara's here, Jane.
I'm also here, Jane. It's Kara.
Okay, is it all right that we move the student spotlight to the front?
Yes.
All right, we'll do that and then I'll make the other one.
Sure.
So,
Sandy,
Can I
before
go?
you let Sandy introduce it.
oh, Sandy, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everybody. And I just wanted to really thank the folks that I'm going to introduce here right now for being on the meeting. I've been talking to you about the summer program and the fact that we got a summer step up grant to support the programs, and we partnered with some wonderful organizations, including the Boys and Girls Club of Pittsfield, to provide an opportunity for some of our children to attend camp at Camp Russell. And tonight we have one of our children on. His name is Alex, and he's there with his dad, Nick. Hi guys, can you wait?
Can you talk to them?
Hi Alex.
Okay, he's.
Pictures of Alex. But we also have 2 of our alumni who are also staff members who worked with us and then went to camp and were camp staff for us and went with Alex, and that's Carly Duvall there from Assumption College there. And we have Grayson Duvall from Mass Maritime who are joining us, and they were both staff members. And I'm sure they're going to be able to fill in the blanks here because Carly, I believe, is the one that sent me the picture and the video that you're about to see. But Chris, could you share with us some pictures, and maybe Alex would be willing to talk about it a little bit. Okay, so here is Alex at Camp Russell. And I have a few questions actually that I'm going to ask, but Carly, what was going on here?
So this was during one of the periods that he got to pick what he wanted to do. And he wanted to try paddleboarding. So standing was difficult, but kneeling worked really well. He went all the way out and the lifeguards helped him turn around and then come back in.
That's so great. So Alex, what was the name of the camp that you went to? Can you tell us?
Camp Russell.
Camp Russell, that's right. So he was on Richmond's Pond right there. That's such a great picture. I love that. Was that fun?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. This guy had a great time every day. He was very excited. So can we go on to the next picture? So here, Alex, what are you doing?
Feeding a donkey.
Feeding a donkey. Do you remember the donkey's name?
No.
No. Grayson, were you there for this?
I was not there for that. I was down at the waterfront, if I remember correctly, for that one.
Waterfront, yes. So that was pretty cool, but now we see the horse. And do you remember the horse's name, Alex?
I only remember two of the horses' names. I don't know which horse that is.
Okay, can you tell us what other horses' names?
I remember Gunner and, wait, actually I remember the ponytail. Hershey's, I believe, and Spirit.
Wow, that's great. Did you paint that horse? You did? Wow, that is so cool. I've never seen that before. What was that like, Carly and Grayson? Were you there for the horse painting activity?
I was. It was very exciting. We got to go twice. So the first time we just led the horses around and met the horses and met the donkeys. And then the second time is during the second picture where he got to lead the horses, ride the horses, and paint the horses. So he was quite the artist.
I guess so. That was a nice job, Alex. So do you think the horse minded being painted, Alex? Or do you like it?
Because the person there told us that the horses have been painted many times and they didn't mind at all.
Oh, that's great. So this next picture, you're right by the sign for Camp Russell. What was your favorite part about Camp Russell?
Camp Russell.
You just loved Camp Russell. Do you think you'd go again if you could?
Yeah.
I think so, yes. But boy, did you like it. So I'm going to go back here because you and Grayson spent time on the water. It was so great to see you on the water. We're going to show a little video here right now. Here's when I got that video, it made my day. So Alex, did you like water skiing?
Yes.
Was it hard?
Yeah. Every time I went water skiing or on the water on the boat, except for the pontoon boat, I always felt like I was going to go in the water.
Did you fall at all?
I don't remember.
Remember. That's a good thing to forget. I know that Grayson and really loved the water and ended up staying at Camp Russell as a staff even after our children left. What was it like down there during water skiing, Grayson?
During water skiing, I found it to be very rewarding in the sense that there wasn't a kid who didn't have fun with it. Everyone had a smile on their face, and it's something, especially with some other districts, the kids normally wouldn't be able to do that in day-to-day activities during the summer. So seeing kids, especially with the adaptive water skiing, seeing them bring in these things to help kids do what they most of the time wouldn't be able to do during the summer was so amazing and just made me smile all the time, which is something I just really love about working there.
You think you would come back and work with us next summer?
Of course, I'm planning on it.
Good, or maybe like say Christmas time when you guys are out.
Yeah.
Both of you, Carly?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Well, thank you both for being on, and Alex and Nick, thank you so very much for being on here tonight. This was a special treat for us, so thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Here.
Okay, I think that I'd take a motion to move the approval of the warrant to the top of the list. We have an in-person representative here.
So moved.
So from Jeffrey, it's moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Dennis. All right, we go. Oh, thank you. Go with it.
Yes.
Roll call. Jeff, I'll go up to the screen. Bonnie,
Yes.
Carrie Ann,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Art,
Yes.
and Jane, yes. Okay.
All right.
And I think what page on the
It is the
agenda packet?
last page.
All right, so that is page 15A.
Okay, so I changed up the way the report looks a little bit, so hopefully this will be a little bit clearer for what everything is. So we had 3 manual warrants. We had voucher 1813 was for spring reps. 1815 was our bond payment, and those 2 were for FY21. And then the third one is the monthly employee withholdings, taxes, and other things. We have a health insurance warrant 9001. That's for the insurance for active and retired employees. And then we have 3 vendor warrants. They're for various monthly expenses. So 8003 is busing and some of the insurances that we pay annually. 8004 is our August retirement, our property insurance. And the last one is just various regular monthly recurring bills.
I move to accept the warrants as presented at 15A for September 23rd, 2021.
Jeffrey, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Dennis. Are there any questions? I don't see any hands, so I'll take a roll call vote. Carrie Ann, sorry.
It's okay. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to see who it was that was presenting, but I don't know the difference of what a manual warrant means exactly.
So what a manual warrant is basically it is entries that we are bringing into the system because they have been done outside of our general ledger. So for instance, payroll is done outside and Terry would import it, or some of these things are wires. That's all of the differences. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. And just thinking back to our budget and the infrastructure upgrades that we're going to be doing this year, do any of these vendor warrants, are they about that work? And when are we going to be seeing and maybe this isn't even how it works, but like once those start happening, when do they start coming out as warrants?
You would see them as we are being invoiced by the vendors and paying them. Or are you talking about the HVAC work that?
Yeah.
I don't know, has that
It won't-
officially kicked off yet?
No, it won't start till probably the end of October.
Okay, so we probably won't start to see bills until November, December.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll take a roll call vote. Bonnie,
Yes.
Carrie Ann,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Arthur,
Yes.
Jane, it passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you for being an in-person reporter. We have not seen anybody from the
quite
business
some
office
time.
for quite a while.
Well, you're very welcome and thank you for moving me up.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank
All right,
you.
so does anyone want to propose any other moves? Because otherwise I will go ahead as we have written it. All right, this meeting, I'm trying to have you all on my computer screen so I can see the hands better, but obviously I failed on the first go around with Carrie, so I will try harder. Now we are going to a motion to approve the minutes of meeting number 1612 of September 9th.
So moved.
Moved by Jeffrey,
Second.
second by Arthur. Any additions? All right, I don't see any hands. Am I missing anyone? All right, go ahead and do a roll call vote. Jeffrey?
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
With regards to 7B, where the motion did not carry. How is that reflected given the council's opinion of what had happened?
So I will be addressing that in unfinished business number 8.
Okay.
I think it wouldn't be in the minutes because this is just reporting what occurred at that meeting. But I will make a public announcement regarding the legal opinion that we got and how we're going forward.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Does that satisfy your need?
It does.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. So Dennis, I'll start with you for approval of the minutes.
Aye.
And Arthur
Yes.
and Jeffrey,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Carrie Ann,
Yes.
and Bonnie.
Yes.
All right. The minutes are approved. I didn't notice any miscellaneous correspondence. Is there something that's come in since this?
Nope.
Okay. We have a student representative report today.
Mr. Berkshire, not yet.
We're in the process of the elections. Kids put out what they'd like to run and what platform they're running under and some of their interests, and then we should be good to go with getting some of that resolved by next week. So hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have a representative.
So I will restate that for the public.
Sorry.
There's a process underway at Mount Everett to elect the student representatives, and hoping that that process moves forward, and as soon as it's completed, we will have a student representative. And I like that the kids go through a process because that's part of the democracy, having to speak up and put yourself out. So, all right. So now, anything else you want to say?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Now, item 6 is public comment, and please raise your hand if you are interested in making a public comment at this time. And I see Danny Odell. I'm recognizing you, and then after that, Amy Drone.
Thank you so much. This is my first public comment at a school board committee meeting, and I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for playing a part in the improvement and the continuation of services in our community. This comment is from my wife, Ilana Steinhauer, and I hope you receive it for all of the positives that it's intended. This is a public comment from Ilana Steinhauer, parent of 2 students within the district, nurse practitioner, and public health worker within the Berkshire County. Dear school board, as you sit in this meeting tonight, I am sitting in another meeting with healthcare providers from Berkshire County. The healthcare providers I sit with are the ones who have been working for the past 20 months to care for our community during this pandemic. We've gotten up every day, left our families, and cared for our community. We've held hands of COVID positive patients just before they were intubated, with tears running down their faces, knowing they would never see their family again. And we then held their hands as they took their last breaths, as their families were unable to be near. We spent months not knowing how COVID was spread, protecting ourselves as best we could, and then coming home to our families, not knowing if we would be bringing this virus to our families. We, as healthcare workers across the country, have witnessed over 600,000 deaths. And now we continue to work providing care for those who do not believe in science, do not believe in masks or vaccines, but who lay gasping for air and begging to be given life-saving medications and, when needed, intubation. So for those of you on this school board, yes, this is emotional. Yes, this is personal. And yes, I do not want my child to ever have to gasp for air begging to be saved. I suspect, like me, many of you in this room look at school boards across the country and cringe when decisions are made about education based on belief or opinion. We are angry when a school board takes away social and emotional education, racial equity education, critical race theory. We look at those school boards as making decisions without evidence as failures, as morally wrong. The past month has put this board in a similar light. On Monday, I sat in on the policy subcommittee meeting. The purpose of this meeting was to draft a vaccine mandate. The committee had not invited any public health expert to the table. During discussions, the committee started to debate masks with a board member making a motion to remove a sentence mandating unvaccinated teachers to wear a KN95 mask or greater. The discussion that followed had comments such as, we should remove this because KN95s are too uncomfortable to wear, and quote, I am partial to the jazzy logos on cloth masks, end quote. At this time, I asked permission to give scientific data on masks to help them make a decision based on scientific evidence. I was quickly told, no, thank you. The committee then proceeded to remove this provision. This moment was significant. It not only has left me questioning the administration and board's ability to make evidence-based decisions impacting the safety of our students, but more significantly, I now question other decisions being made in relation to our children's education. To lose trust in your school district is the beginning of the end of a relationship. As elected, I'm almost finished. As elected officials, please remind yourselves it is your obligation and responsibility to ensure that all decisions you are making are based on validated, peer-reviewed evidence, expert advice, and that you are doing your due diligence to thoroughly understand the issue presented, have critically examined the data, and ensured your personal opinions do not cloud this extremely important process.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
All right, I remind you that it's a 3-minute limit, so if you have something to say that adds to what was just said, please go ahead and use your time for that. We heard very well. Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you so much. Can I actually give the floor to Alex? I'd like to provide my public comment after.
I suppose.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. First, could you confirm you can hear me, because I'm sitting in a car, as you can see.
We can hear.
Thank you so much. I'll be as brief as I can. Thank you for the opportunity. I understand that we're on the verge of mandating vaccination for district employees, and I'm greatly relieved at that impending decision. But I think what we have to do is look beyond it by looking at it. We recognize that unvaccinated people pose a risk to our children. That's why we mandate that teachers and staff be vaccinated, because they will be in close proximity to our children. So I would like to urge the committee to extend the decision beyond mandating vaccination to provide that unvaccinated staff, employees, unvaccinated because of medical or religious exemptions, be placed in positions in the school where they will not have close contact with students. It makes no sense, and it poses a real danger if we say, oh, you don't have to be vaccinated for religious or medical reasons, but you can still be close to the students. It's illogical and dangerous. That, of course, will require taking a close look at the exemptions. And we see, I believe, quite a large number of medical exemptions. I understand that Massachusetts is quite strict about what constitutes a basis for a medical exemption. A doctor who has a prior relationship with the individual seeking the exemption must certify that that individual will suffer a specific anaphylactic reaction to the vaccination. That is the sole basis for an exemption. And we must impose that requirement in our vaccination mandate so that we don't have unjustified, unnecessary, and dangerous exemptions. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alex, for the additional information. Amy?
Thank you so much. Thanks, Alex. And thank you, as both other public commenters have stated, thank you for all of your efforts I'm sorry, I will put my video on. Thank you for all your work with all of our kids. So just to echo Alex's comment, in terms of the exemptions that are medical or religious, we need to ensure that those exemptions are reviewed by an outside medical professional. I'm not familiar with what the internal review process is, but because there is one exemption, one qualified medical exemption, it seems extremely unlikely that there would be 13 staff members that have this very rare anaphylactic reaction to a component of the vaccine. So I ask you to ensure that there's a written policy requiring that every single one of those medical or religious exemptions is reviewed by an outside medical or religious community member. So that can be de-identified, you can take names off, but it's really critical that each one of those is carefully reviewed, because it seems actually impossible, like medically and scientifically impossible, that there are 12 to 13 individuals in our small community that have a documented anaphylactic reaction to one of the components of the vaccine. So that is what I'd like to propose. Thank you.
So you all have your hands up still. I would assume that you understand that you've spoken, and I don't have to look for your hand again. Thank you. And I think I have a hand up behind me that I can't see.
Hi, I'm in person.
You have to come
Can I-
closer
Oh, I
because
have to come closer.
Just
Sorry,
sit here and-
sorry, I'm not sure of the in-person protocol.
Just start the owl.
Oh, okay.
And introduce yourself if you would.
Thank you for sharing your seat. I'm Sarah Sickett. I'm a teacher in high school, 9 through 12 math, but I'm also a mom of a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old who attend here. My question is kind of general. Who's going to ensure that the students in my room, who are between the ages of 14 and 18, respect a spot for me, since they might not have been vaccinated, as people are asking, that teachers who are unvaccinated could find a location again away from students? Is there a mandate that students who are unvaccinated can find a location away from teachers? I take this very seriously. My kids are awesome mask wearers. I'm a vaccinated individual that I share publicly. But I think the horse is out of the barn, and we might be looking at this the wrong way. In my classroom, there are 60 students at least who walk in and out of there every day between the ages of 14 and 18. And there is no mandate that they be vaccinated. It is not my colleagues' behavior that I'm concerned about. I'm not reminding my colleagues to pull up their masks. My colleagues are not having as risky behavior in terms of how teenagers interact on a general basis that we are working diligently to ensure they remember. We are not sitting at the table with students with our masks down any place or out at lunch. We are not, it is not the adults who are huddled next to each other that we are reminding them you're outside, but you still need your distance. I would just like everyone to remember that there are adults in this building, and we work with teenagers who are unvaccinated every day. We're focusing on a very tiny subset of very responsible adults. And the horse is out of the barn in terms of all of the teenagers or students ages 12 through 18 who attend this building with no mandate. I think our focus might be in the wrong place. I am a strong believer in vaccinations, but you are missing a giant subset in this school and focusing on a very tiny part of responsible adults. And I just thought that that needed to be expressed.
Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. So we have, I think we have finished with public comments, and we are going on to our new business section. Glad to have people staying, listening in to see how we work. This is a business meeting, and this particular item I placed on the agenda to bring my colleagues into focus on the work that we're going to try to do this year. We have 2 meetings in October, 1 in November, because of a holiday falling on one of our Thursdays. You can note at the end, the future agenda items are going to be MCAS update. This is from the administration, district improvement plans, superintendent goals, that's October, school improvement plan in November, and etc. So there's work that we as school committee members have talked about wanting to do this year. And this item is just to do a little housekeeping to figure out these 4 items listed, the budget process is a big responsibility of ours. We have negotiations for all the units this year. There was a discussion that our policy manual has not been reviewed for 6 to 8 years. I don't have the exact number, but it's probably appropriate that there was a desire to bring in the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, which is our advisory state organization that helps with our training and supports the manual that you access when you go online. And we have a big interest in our anti-bias, anti-racist action plan. I want to get some indications perhaps tonight to start thinking of what the timeline, if there's a sense of the order of how we accomplish this, because many of us are on multiple subcommittees. So somebody who is worrying about the budget and is on the policy subcommittee, for instance, that's probably too much to run a policy review and work on the budget simultaneously. Because we're all volunteers, many are working parents, and so I'm trying to set up our year ahead. And I'm looking for, there's no vote involved here, no commitment. I'd like to just get a sense of how people are feeling about this work that we have discussed wanting to do. And if I can get a sense of priorities tonight, that would be helpful. I'm happy to schedule an extra workshop meeting where we go into this more deeply. Tonight is just brief. Anybody have any words to say here? Especially the people who have done negotiations before, like Bonnie. And our budget specialist would be Dennis and Jeffrey understand this. I don't know if anyone else has been through a policy review, and the anti-bias, anti-racist action plan is completely new. So Dennis?
I'm not sure exactly what we would do with the budget review. We have a process that we've followed for a number of years now that basically involves both, the school committee and the administration in a whole series of steps that we go through. I don't
No, we're
know.
not changing that. I'm just saying, these are the big chunks of work that we as a board, a committee, are doing. The budget's not optional. The negotiations are not optional because that's, the policy review is up to our discretion if we want to take that on, as is the anti-bias, anti-racial action plan, which were our own initiative. So I'm just trying to put that out to everybody to be realistic about the work that we want to do, so that when we look back over this year, we feel like we accomplished what we wanted to, and we had a timetable in which to do it. Then, as you say, the budget is already set up. The timetable starts in November. We start doing the work, and it has to be done by March, the first meeting in March. So that's not flexible. And the negotiations, we've already been asked by the union to start. So the sooner we start that, the better. Jeffrey.
Thank you. Part of me is like, let's go do it all. But I think what the last 3 academic years have proven is that COVID has been very time consuming. The regional school district planning board has been a drain on people's attention and time. So if we had to prioritize, I would suggest holding off on the policy manual review. I think the anti-bias, anti-racist action plan is an important thing to keep on going with and not lose momentum on that work, and full acknowledgement that a fiduciary responsibility is to complete budget and to negotiate with the collective bargaining units.
Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm taking note of your comments, and I'll get a sense if you're willing to come back for a special meeting to go into more detail, or you're going to leave it to me. And I only am chair officially for 2 more meetings, because we're going to be getting together on November 18th for elections and reorganization. So I don't want to be overbearing in assigning things. I just want to keep us current. All right, well, I don't hear opinions from other people, so Carrie Ann, thank you. It's in the corner. Got it.
Thanks, Jane. Jane, can you, sorry. In the anti-racism, anti-bias action plan, one of our steps is to do a policy review, which is already in the process. So is the policy manual review that you have listed outside of that something different, or what is that referring to exactly?
That is a formal and probably deeper review than what we had talked about before. I think when you did the catalog of all the policies to try to figure out which ones were probably the ones that we needed to deal with because of looking for anti-bias, anti-racist approaches, that doesn't apply to everything in the manual. So it did jump up to this other idea for a full review with MASC. The other one, I think we were planning to do on our own.
And the full review with MASC, what are the goals?
Just to update everything, look for all the things that are outdated, making sure that we haven't missed adding ones that MASC suggested. And since I haven't done it myself, I believe we have to contract with them and pay them some money for it. I think Beth was telling me maybe around $6,000, but this is just, general ballpark. And if Bonnie or Dennis has experienced this process, or Art, can you please jump in? Bonnie? And
it seems to me that it was not that long ago, and I would assume, Dennis, you probably were involved more than I, that we had an extensive review of our policy manual, and that's when we switched over to having the entire policy manual monitored through MASC, and we get the automatic updates. And I mean, that seemed to be quite extensive. So my sense is, if we've kept up our relationship, which is part of our membership that we do not pay additional for with MASC in terms of policy, especially, referring to what Jeff said, with the involvement of so many people with the regional school planning board and everything else that we have to do, I would say, yes, we have to look at the part of the anti-bias issues, anti-racism, but I don't know whether we should undertake a massive review of our policy.
Thank you, Bonnie. And Dennis, do you want to add to that?
Yes, basically, when we hired MASC a number of years ago to do a quote policy review, there was a very clear need. Basically, we had gone through a period of time where there were a lot of things in the policy that were totally outdated from current law and everything else. And that was a quick and much more efficient way, although it cost us, a fair amount of money, to get to where we were at least back to where we should be at that point in time. My personal opinion is that since that time, since we had that work done and paid for it to be done, and it was done by outside independent eyes that basically found all those things that needed to be changed. That in the meantime, because we have become more of a MASC policy driven organization, in that we you know, our policies are on the MASC website. We, you know, you can always go look at them there. Anybody else can look at them. You can look at anybody else's that's out there, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But I don't think that we probably need that level of support that we used a few years ago when we had, you know, MASC come in and really get us back up to at least ground zero.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, this is helpful, and I will be trying to make recommendations before the reorganization meeting about how we would schedule our work ahead, and I hope to schedule a workshop meeting to work further on the anti-bias, anti-racist action plan. So going on to the unfinished business. What? Oh, I'm sorry. That was very, we have guests in the house. I'm very grateful. I just want to say for the efforts that Beth has made in relation to how to keep our schools safe and working with the public health officials at the state and local level. And we are very lucky to have some of those people here for us on the committee to ask questions, to clarify issues. And I'm going to turn it over to Beth to introduce. And again, thank you very much.
So I just want to say that, you know, Sandy actually oversees, is the director of health services in her role. So she and the nurses work tirelessly at this. And so I certainly want to give that credit there. What I think has been a really great outcome, and we were talking about this the other day, is how we get to meet lots of other community members and public health officials who are saying, let's step up and have these conversations and work together. And it has just been a really, I think, helpful and important part of this work as we've moved forward into the continuation of dealing with COVID. So I see on here Amy Hart, who is, I believe, is the regional public health nurse. I'm probably saying all the titles wrong, so I'll let you say it when. And I believe Jill Sweet is on here. Yes, welcome, Jill. And who is the South County, and particularly our public health representative. Is there anybody else on here that, or is it just you two? I don't mean to, if I miss somebody, please chime in. But we talked a lot about a couple of important things, and the main goal of having the public, this public health team meeting is a couple of things. Is, you know, keeping these lines of communication between the schools and the public health officials wide open, and finding ways to support each other by sharing information, data, strategies, resources, any ways that we can do better to make the schools as safe as possible. So we are constantly reaching out, and they've been really gracious working with us on a variety of issues. And the last piece, which I thought was brought up by one of our partners in our group meeting this week, was it's about there's a ton of information out there. It is confusing, cumbersome, a lot to go through, and we've been trying to share as much as possible and make it as user-friendly as possible. But the reality is it's serious, but everybody's got a lot going on. So we wanted to find ways to give you the best information and the most cohesive information and point you to some places to go. So in the packet tonight, I included a couple different pieces of information it's in 7B in your packet. And one of them was just from the Mass Association of School Superintendents. They have never done this before. This is a document that they collected. Only 158 of us out of the 325 school districts reported, but they did some facts and figures on what's going on across the whole state. So that's a document for people to look at. There was a chart here prepared, and I'll let Amy talk about this a little bit later. I thought it was a visual that is coming out weekly, is a different way to look at the data that's more locally generated. And I put in the latest and greatest frequently asked questions from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And wouldn't you know it, another one came out yesterday on testing. So we are doing our best to keep up and to share it all with all of you. The one exciting thing that we also learned in our meeting yesterday was that the documentation from DESE, and you'll notice in the FAQs when we get it out there to the whole public that you'll see DESE/DPH. So it's nice that there's a little more connection and continuity between the information that's coming from all agencies. And so I think that is something of note, because we were talking to each other about, hey, are you getting this? Are you getting that? And how can we be sure everybody is on the same page with the information we're giving? So before I turn it over, one of the things we talked about, and I think this goes to, what does it mean to be in a school committee meeting and have public participation, because we do value that. But this is, the school committee meeting is the business of the school committee in public. So there's public comment, but it's not an interactive, and we recognize that. So we've been working to have these community conversations because we feel it's really important to let the community have access to not only us, but in a more conversational way. But we've asked our public health partners if they would be willing to spend a night with us and answer questions and have that interaction that is not what happens in a school committee meeting. So on October 6th at 6 o'clock, we will do it via Zoom, but we'll have an opportunity for families or anybody who wants to join us to have an interactive dialogue with our public health officials, and I'm really excited about that. And I will put it in written form. There's, as you know, been a lot going on, so I'll put this out tomorrow, and I will share it on not only our website, but through the app to people who have it. But if people want to send in questions ahead of time, so we can give the public health people a heads up as to how best to contact us, or what they might be, people are most interested in, I think that would be very helpful. And before I turn it over to others, I just wanted to say for tonight, the purpose of having our guests on was specifically for the school committee to ask their questions and get their, back and forth before you make decisions a little later on. So, Jane, I don't know if you want to, Dennis has his hand up.
Like a question I had, which is to Beth, is that what is your definition of public health officials? Who is it that you're talking about? Are you talking about the agents of each of the 5 towns? Or?
Yes, but some of them cover even more than that. So, that's been tricky, and that was one of the things we talked about. Like when we were talking about reporting data, and they'd be happy to answer this as well. Amy, like I said, it's a regional public health, and we have the South County. So anybody who wants to join us and give us more information and share with us process, and we'll let anybody on that conversation. But we're just trying to blend and support. We're not medical professionals. Sandy and I have been charged with, and we have the nurses, but we want to have as many voices in the room helping us make decisions and send out information. So that's the point of all of this. And Amy,
I'll go ahead and answer. It's a great question because, there's a saying in public health, when we do our job well, we're invisible. You'll never know who we are. We are in the background most of the time. Then come a pandemic, front and center, and often the target, unfortunately. So I and Jill Sweet, who is my colleague here tonight, we are both public health nurses. You may remember Jill. She worked for a number of years with the school district, and so has an intimate knowledge of what the school nurses are working with. She only left that position after the end of this past year, so she's also familiar with the COVID situation in the school setting. My background is more from a sort of higher level public health, but I'm also a nurse. Jill and I are also parents, and we have kids in the local school district. So I feel like we come at this from a lot of angles. Where we take our authority from, to be perfectly clear with everybody. So we are part of the Southern Berkshire Public Health Collaborative. We are a state Department of Public Health funded program. The idea of this was to leverage and really maximize the authority of the local boards of health. And Massachusetts, as you may or may not know, is a very unusual state in the United States, where every town has its own local public health authority at that granular level. In some ways it's fabulous. In other ways, it's a nightmare for public health work when you really need to consider that we are all constantly mixing and matching and blending in all of our interactions. Our kids are here, we go work here, you know, even crossing state lines, as we've talked about, the particular nature of being in a corner of a state and what that means for things like testing and symptoms and traveling and all of that. We did deal with a lot of that last year. So we work very closely with the boards of health. Our program has an advisory board comprised of health agents and boards of health, and we are working with 10 towns in Southern Berkshire County, all of the towns in your catchment area, as well as all the way up through the tri-towns and out to Otis, if that helps you geographically.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Oh, yeah, well, let's be clear. At this point, I'm going to be recognizing members of the school committee who have questions for each of these women. And I'm not sure if one's more of an expert on one thing than another, so I'm going to leave it to you two to answer questions as you feel you are the one to be the answerer, if that's clear enough. So I see Carrie Ann has a hand up, and Jeffrey will be after that, and then I'll keep watching for hands.
Thank you. Amy, it's really great to see you as always. And Jill, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that you have both the state perspective and our regional perspective at hand when considering, you know, the pandemic and the just the terribleness that we're involved in right now. The sheet that Beth had mentioned that's in our school packet, it states, I think it's that that there's an increase in cases of the schools that participated in this data set from 1.05 last year to 1.71 this year, which generally indicates that there's increased cases in our school communities. And I'm wondering if you could speak to us a little bit about what you see as the role. It's a hard question. What we need to be doing, how we need to be being proactive, how as a school committee where our purview is limited to policy and budget, but yet we're also holding community voices. Where do you think our next steps are? You know, we heard today from somebody who was talking about student vaccine mandates. I'm just curious about your overall perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie Ann. I think I'll go ahead and start. Jill, if you want to jump in, feel free. I will begin by confessing my overall ignorance of the purview of school committee. Even though I've had children in the schools, I think maybe like public health, when you do your job well, I may not know much about what you do. But I think for anyone in a leadership role in the school setting, you know, we're looking to the science, and the science does indicate that vaccination makes a massive difference, massive positive difference in disease outcomes. And that's really the focus. You know, I will confess, as a public health person, you know, we had enormous state leadership over the past, I would say 12 months. And then when the vaccines became, with a high uptake in Massachusetts, in the Northeast in particular, we saw a backing away. And we all maybe remember at the end of May, suddenly anyone who was fully vaccinated was not required to wear a mask anymore. Around that time, there was a shift even in contact tracing. Anyone who's fully vaccinated, no longer needing to quarantine. Fast forward 3 months and Delta is now nearly, 100% of the variants in new cases in the Northeast and indeed across the country. And what do we know about Delta? We know that Delta can break through vaccines at a much higher rate than we were led to expect when we all got vaccinated back in the spring, many of us. And we also know about Delta that has, of course, a much higher viral load, a faster replication rate in the body. And so people are infectious before they even know it. And so the masks needed to come back on for everyone. And as a community, as a state, as a country, we've been grappling with this. It's hard to adjust to this new reality. And I think we have to keep in mind that we don't even know what will come next. We're dealing with the reality that we know. And I'm, constantly tracking the CDC surveillance around variant presence. I'm looking at new knowledge around the Delta variant and looking at, new variants, of course, coming up. And for leaders, I think we try our best, public health, this has been our goal since we formed this program a few months ago, is to try to capsulize the information. And that's where the idea of a weekly dashboard that specifically pertains to the 17 towns in southern Berkshire County, we were seeing a difference in how transmission was happening. As I compare the two week to week, now that I've been doing it for a month now, those differences seem to be consolidating a little bit, which is an interesting thing. And I accompany each week's data dashboard with a little narrative about what we're seeing, because we are the ones making the calls day in and day out with school nurses, with the students and their families, with restaurant and business owners, with anything you can imagine, gyms, sports teams. We have a sense, hospitals and long-term care facilities. We have a sense of sort of what's happening, and we try to communicate across the county about that. So again, going back to what can leaders do at the school level, I think being receptive to that information is key, and we greatly appreciate that. I think then thinking of your role as a leader in the school committee, in the school community, to advocate, there's a fine line, mandating, requiring, advocating, and also I always think about making it easier. How do we make it easier to get people vaccinated? Pretty soon we're going to be looking at eligibility for the 5 to 11-year-olds. How do we as a community come together around that and make it easier, put the information up front around safety and help reassure people so that you can meet your goals around improving your vaccine percentage in your building. So I appreciate the comments about, are we focusing on teachers? Should we focus on students too? Yes, to all of it. And your voices really obviously matter. You were elected for a good reason to serve your community. So I think to turn that back around is important.
Can you talk a little bit though about what you're seeing as far as spread in schools?
That's a great question. I think it's what we're all worried about. Is our schools going to serve as this petri dish for COVID to just spread through the unvaccinated community and even the vaccinated, and who will be bringing it in? The reality is that since school began, we haven't seen any evidence of school spread. And I'm knocking on wood right now because in the next moment that could change. But my theory is that the mitigation strategies that the schools have in place are working really well. It does happen. We certainly have evidence across the state of in-school spread. I'm not saying it's not possible at all or that it's not likely, but we have not seen it in the first 3 weeks of this year so far. I just from the one case that's happened in this district so far, I was so impressed with some of the things you're doing, other schools are not doing, knowing exactly where kids are because you have a plan for where they eat when they have their masks off, knowing exactly who the kids are going to be around them. So you can immediately, hone in on those, having assigned seating in the classroom. These things are really helpful. We talked a little bit about in the safety meeting or the public health meeting yesterday, where might our vulnerabilities be? Maybe around busing, but we can all keep an eye on that. The buses have their policies. We have to, just make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, because we do rely on the windows being open and the masks being on and, whatever the measure of distancing. My brain is blanking right now, but because of that, we are able to exclude the students on that bus as close contacts. And so far that has been appropriate. We are not seeing spread in that way. if it changes, again, so the Department of Ed is the one making that policy. And when that changes in a considerable way, we would expect them to change their policy. And again, they are partnering really well with the Department of Public Health this fall. That partnership really got ramped up in June, I believe, when they started planning for the fall and what they were going to do. And at that point, all of the guidelines had been relaxed. So it was just an open question of what school was going to look like this year. So it seems like a consistently good collaboration happening. So we're grateful for it.
Okay, Jeff, thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you. I have a bunch of kind of just smaller questions, and you can stop me and then give other people a chance. But Amy and Jill, we have a policy right now. It's or like a program where we have opt-in testing from students and their families for pool testing, so that we can detect on a weekly basis. In speaking with some parents, a suggestion was made, what about opt-out? And as a way of looking at that, are there examples that you can point to of opt-out testing where it's worked out, if there was a better increase of testing? And is once a week sufficient, or should we be looking at multiple incidences? That's the first question.
Great question. You know, I wish I had been the one to design DESI's protocol around this. I would have definitely gone for opt-out because it's a very minimally invasive procedure. You know, if given the chance, most parents wouldn't really have much of an issue. Once the children experience it once, they would know it's not a big deal. The opt-in is challenging. I myself have gone through the online consent for my own children, and it was just, you know, unsettling. It seemed a little bit too personal. It seemed lengthy. It was hard to parse through with so much verbiage. I didn't love it at all. We've talked a little bit about on the Public Health Committee that met yesterday. In the event that we do identify students as close contacts and they don't have the consent already in place from their family, could we on the fly push out a paper document or email one that could quickly be sent back to the school? And it seemed like there was a plan, or I don't know about plan yet, but there was an idea that would happen. And to your question about the 1 week, it's a great question. I mean, the 1 week pool testing originated with previous variants of the virus. I think, you know, from an epidemiological perspective, ideally you might have twice weekly, but that is not what DESI is requiring or offering, I should say. And let's remember also, I think it might be important to remember that the test and stay is an offering. It's not a requirement by DESI. Schools are encouraged to use that program as a way to keep kids in school and to reduce disruption in their learning. Because of course, as we all know, they ensured that virtual could not be an option for anyone, which that's also something I wouldn't have done if it were me, but nobody put me in charge of DESI. You know, given the reality and the challenge of, you know, let's say we had, I mean, we don't have 100% consent, but you know, in an ideal world, we'd have everyone in the building, let's say, tested once a week. That's a lot of tests. That in itself is disruptive. Even if you have half of the building testing once a week, it's a heavy burden on the nursing staff. I'm glad that CIC is going to be helping them with that. But it's so much paperwork. Even this is, in fact, for those who don't know, this is probably the main reason why the consents went online, is because nurses last year had a nightmare with paper consents. So some beneficial things happen, but then there are some downsides too.
Before you go on, I'm just going to look for other hands and I'll come back to you, but I don't see any other hands at the moment. And I'm looking very closely.
Sorry, I thought my hand must have.
Okay, I see you, Bonnie.
Okay. A few things, but I'll start with what I think is the simplest. In terms of students, the numbers seem to be throughout South County low in terms of those who are able to be vaccinated, who are vaccinated. And I know that there are some districts that have taken stronger stances on students who are able being vaccinated. And from hearing from some parents who've had their children vaccinated, and they want to keep on taking part in sports and doing other things. What is your sense of what's going on, either in terms of what you recommend or what you're hearing? Because I personally would like to take a stronger stand for those who are able to be vaccinated.
It's a great point. I do agree with you. I think, I think one thing we could do, going back to Desi's sort of protocols that they rolled out at the end of the summer for a moment, when they did finally mandate mask wearing within the indoor setting in schools, they accompanied it with essentially a goal, which is if schools could get to 80% of vaccination within the building between students and staff, they would drop the mask requirement. Now that was floated at the end of the summer, and I believe it's been recently reconfirmed as something that they will uphold if the schools can demonstrate that that goal has been reached. I remember growing up, all kinds of, whether it was fundraisers or bringing in canned goods or whatever, different classrooms having incentives, pizza parties, all kinds of things. I've seen a lot of different things happening across the state in different school districts. I have colleagues that have been organizing recurring on-site vaccination clinics at the schools. I've led one myself at a high school. It was fabulous. The kids even provided sort of support. A couple, I remember, were a little nervous about getting the shot, and being with your friends made it a little easier, it seemed. And I had my own kids done over at WB Du Bois, and I know that being in the gym and in the space there with other kids their age actually made it a little easier. So for those who are anxious, that could be beneficial.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you give us some specific examples of successful programs so we don't reinvent the wheel, and that we can bring this up for discussion sooner rather than later? We're getting to the point where windows are not going to be able to stay open all the time. We have all our kids who would like to be taking part in activities and all, and if we can encourage it, what are the things that work? We don't want to make it more difficult for parents. And maybe I'm wrong, and you can explain this medically, but to me, when you take a test, the test is a moment in time. I could just as soon come up with a negative in pool testing and be exposed, and let's say let's say I wasn't vaccinated, tomorrow be completely exposed. So I don't particularly see how weekly testing gets us a great deal. I mean, it's more than zero, but I think our emphasis really should be on getting people vaccinated. And then I have a comment. I want to ask you another question about the religious one, but if you answer the part about if you have examples we can turn to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have, obviously I wasn't prepared for that question. I think it would be a great thing even to ask Desi to sort of put out, success stories around that, because I think we're all, and we all have, of course, weekly calls with the state, and the Department of Public Health could also work on this, because we're all working on this everywhere. To your question about, is it sufficient to conduct weekly testing in order to protect and avoid spread within a school? The first thing I just want to say about that is that the moment you're exposed to somebody who's infectious, you yourself do not become infectious. And I think it's easy to forget that. However, we also know about the Delta variant, that it does replicate faster than previous variants of the coronavirus. And so the timing has shortened a bit. I will add to that comment though, the state has not changed any of their timeframes around quarantine, isolation, or contact tracing parameters. And I think that, I'm not an official at the state. I don't have access to the minds of their epidemiologists, but I have learned to have a lot of faith in them over this period of time. My guess is that statistically the amount of, so you're exposed, let's say Monday, you do get a sufficient amount of viral dose in your system to start making copies. You know, we are seeing, I would say, from a contact tracing perspective, when we call cases and hear about exposures, we are seeing a shorter time frame. You know, when alpha was predominant, I was seeing household spread occur on day 10. So people were in a home with an infectious person trying to isolate, but maybe not doing a great job. And it would be day 10 when the others would show up with positive results. Now we're seeing either co-occurring. So they both got the dose, and because Delta is much more infectious, they, you know, two siblings might've gotten at the same time, or we're seeing within maybe 5 days or so that other household member coming up with a symptom and then getting a positive test. So it has changed, but the state hasn't changed their guidance. And I'm just, maybe I'm naive. I feel like if it were such a dramatic shift, they would have shifted everything around that. So to answer your question short, you know, my guess is that, you know, of the 5 days that kids are in school, if you're getting tested weekly, you have a good shot at catching most of that. There is a possibility, but there are also 2 days of the week when they're at home. So, you know, there's no exposure happening there. So I feel like they probably split the difference and found like the best with the least impact approach with that, is my guess.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm looking for new member hands up. I see hers is up.
Okay.
That would be a new, you know, going back in the
Okay,
circle, which
apologize.
I don't mind doing, but I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the people in the room here. I don't want to
Or
ignore.
she's looking at you.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so now Carrie Ann has a second question.
This has been extremely helpful to have medical expertise that the school committee can be referencing. And it's something that I would like for us to consider having in a regular opportunity, given how COVID is not going away, and that we need to have access as a committee to expert information to be making the decisions that we're making. And I would like for the committee to consider us actually forming an advisory committee of a task force just focused on COVID, for when we need to be getting specific data points answered. And according to our policy manual, file BDF, we are allowed to do such things for short intervals and for whatever special focus that we would like. And I think that this is one of those times that we desperately need to have medical information available to the school committee.
Okay. Duly noted. Let's see, Bonnie, you had another question?
Yes. My question is regarding the religious exemption. I've heard a number of experts around the country over the past 2 weeks saying that that religious organizations have come back and said, don't use religion as an excuse. I mean, even a statement from Christian Science. So I was wondering what you are hearing and what you are seeing in terms of school districts, and school districts now saying we will not accept beyond the anaphylactic shock of medical, we're not accepting anything as an exemption. Have you had any updates on that?
I think that's a legal question. I would consult our legal counsel before.
No, I agree, but I want to know if they've heard in their milieu anything in that area.
Doesn't matter.
Honestly, I couldn't comment. That sort of granular level of vaccination status and what, I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but to my knowledge, I only know of one school district in our area that has mandated staff vaccination. And I actually don't know the specifics of how that's gone on the back end.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeffrey?
Amy, music is a real big part of our school community, as you're probably aware of. just kind of curious, like other districts that you're dealing with, how are music requirements being dealt with, especially like instruments that require blowing? Singing, you can always cover your mouth with a mask, but kind of curious, what are you hearing? And is there a prohibition on certain instruments? If you could advise.
So I have not heard of anything of this nature for this term so far. I'm going to ask Jill if in your discussions with any of the school nurses or anybody, have you been privy to any of those sorts of prohibitions or even conversations?
I have not yet, at least.
I mean, I will say, I'll just add that anytime you have, by default, an increase in the amount of potential viral load in a space, in an indoor space, my strong recommendation is to maximize the ventilation in that space as much as you possibly can. And I just want to remind folks, there's a lot of confusion because really the 6 feet got so rigid and hardened in our ideas if you were safe from 6 feet away. And that was sort of an early on general guideline that became even to the point where it's, like, as I mentioned earlier, it's part of our contact tracing definition for this state and most states, to my understanding, in the CDC. The reality about of the 3 prominent modes of transmission of this virus, 2 of which are respiratory and 1 of which is direct contact into an orifice, essentially. We have droplet and we have aerosol. Droplet, those are the larger, heavier, fall to the ground, fall on your clothing sorts of viral particles. Aerosolized, they may be smaller in number, but they disperse, they hang in the air for hours potentially, and they travel. We have well-documented research of how far they can go, up to 20 feet. And so what we are actually thinking about when we think about transmission risk, we're thinking about viral load, the amount of actual virus that's in the air that can enter a person's system. And whenever we have maximized air exchange, where we, and this is all, we've all heard this, but also sometimes I wonder how much it really sort of becomes concrete. If I had people blowing anything or singing anything, even with masks on, I would have every window open and fans blowing that air in and out, and not directly in anyone's face, by the way, but I would certainly be making the most of that. If I had, ultraviolet air purifier, I'd have that running in there. I would, not have an hour-long session. I'd have a half-hour session. I would be thinking of ways to reduce that. If it was normally a class of 30, I might make it a class of 10 or 15. Anything we could do to reduce potential viral load, knowing that that 6 feet isn't necessarily the buffer we may always think of it as being. The masks are important, but you've got it off and you're blowing air out now. So it's a different story.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to ask the question about the N95 masking that was brought up in our policy subcommittee meeting, and what's the latest thinking about that?
I don't know about the discussion that was held. Do you want to be a little more specific, maybe?
If somebody is not vaccinated, a teacher, they should be required to wear one of those masks because it's more protective. And that compares with earlier advisories last year that those would be reserved for hospital workers, et cetera. So I just wanted to, since we have you in the room, have you give us an opinion.
That is a good question for maybe all of us to think about when we're in high risk situations, or if we're unvaccinated or can't be vaccinated. So an N95 mask only works as well as it fits. And so in any medical setting where it's used, all of the medical personnel are required yearly, actually, to undergo fit testing. And I've done this myself to test whether air can go in or out of that mask. For a lay person to just slap one on, not specific to their face shape or size, is a little bit pointless. If you want to consider something like a KN95, and I know some have been approved and some are, maybe junk, and it's hard to know the difference. But what they do have going for them is they fit around the face versus across the face. And anyone, if you look around, anyone wearing a surgical or disposable mask, you often see gaps here, and maybe it's not pressed in here, and maybe it's hanging down here, because we all have different face shapes. For people who are at risk, and I would include anyone unvaccinated in that group, or maybe an older person and hasn't got the 3rd dose yet, as we're now seeing was just approved this afternoon, actually. We are recommending 2 layers, the surgical and then a cloth, or a cloth with a filter. And it needs to fit well. It needs to be the right one for your face. If you have to tighten your straps, if you need to try a different brand, really paying attention as parents and as adults working in the classroom to what we're wearing, not just assuming anything we slap on is going to do the job, or that an N95 that is designed for a certain purpose and tested that way is necessarily going to be better.
Thank you. All right. Really appreciate all the time you put in to this meeting. I think we'll probably be asking to see you again or to be in touch with you when we have further questions. And I think the community is going to be extremely pleased to have the opportunity to have a Zoom with you. So thank you for your generosity in trying to communicate what's happening in our region for kids and teachers.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. All right. So let's see.
So field trips.
Field trips is the item 3C. And I think this is for Beth and possibly is Jesse here?
Yes, but I think it's just, I really just wanted to kind of get it on your radar if possible. We've been talking about it as an administrative team, and there's people who have been, thinking about different opportunities. And what we just wanted to get the discussion in front of you to see if you would consider field trips where it would be outside mostly, locally in Berkshire County, nothing overnight, but if there would be some opportunity for some of those kinds of activities to happen. Whatever, just get it on the radar, because people are interested in doing some things, including even the exhibit going on at the Historical Society, being able to see that and do that. So we said no field trips, and we just thought we'd get it back on your radar to see if there'd be something that you would consider in some way, shape, or form. So it doesn't have to be today, but we just.
Yeah, it looks like Bonnie has a comment.
Actually, my comment was to the previous activity. So yeah, I'm all for having consideration of field trips based upon, that there would be the careful review. But I would like, before we leave today, if it's appropriate, I want to go to what Carrie Ann suggested and possibly introduce a motion for the formation of an ad hoc school committee for the duration of the pandemic. So if I know it's not on the agenda, but I think given what we've heard tonight, I'd like to introduce that motion at some point.
I would suggest that if that you and Carrie Ann draft a description of what this committee, this task force would consist of and what the role would be, that you could bring it back to the next meeting where we can thoughtfully consider that, rather, because the idea is a good idea, but normally we have a description, and I think that would be very valuable to have. I don't know if there's some, Dennis?
I guess a point I would say is it would be extremely valuable, for example, if this were to occur, that if we could have an outside person like Amy as a member of that, that would be high value.
Yes, absolutely. And there's other models we could consider because we have liaisons that serve, for early childhood, and we have liaisons to various.
Right,
or-
exactly.
So we could have somebody from the committee who attends those meetings with that, if you feel that gives us more direct contact. So I think before we create another body, let's consider our options to gain what we're hoping to gain, which is direct information to the school committee.
Carrie Ann, are you willing to consult and we'll come up with something for the next meeting?
Are you asking if I would be willing to do it with you, or you want me to
Yes.
do it on my own?
No, with me, the two of
I would
us.
love to, Bonnie.
Okay, it'll be on the next, and it'll be on the next agenda, okay?
Sounds great.
All righty.
All righty. So on the field trips, I think that we would be looking to have a good definition of how kids would be kept safe on the field trips and the usual academic value that they have. And I guess do we want a motion to, I don't know whether we need a motion. I think there's a sense that we're open to people bringing forth ideas for local outings for kids that are not overnight. Is that what you were stating, Beth?
Well, yes, but I think we had it, the last policy or protocol, let me say, I think that was put into the reopening plan, stated that we would not be doing any
Okay.
field trips.
So
So
you want
I just feel like we should make a formal proposal of what we might consider or how that would happen.
So I'll entertain a motion if somebody wants to put that into words regarding change in field trip protocol. Dennis?
I move that we allow the superintendent to make determination on field trips in restarting field trips in a manner that contains all COVID safety possible that she can determine. Second.
I'm just gonna, I'm writing this down. So we have the motion to allow the superintendent to determine value of restarting field trips using all COVID safety measures. Do I have any discussion? Bonnie?
Yes, Dennis, would you entertain an amendment that would have the superintendent present to us at our next meeting a plan for approval of any trips, parameters and approval, since we have to sign off on any trip. I think we should have a set of guidelines in place.
You sign off on overnight, right?
So you're Bonnie, if I can make it a little bit more interactive, are you saying you'd like her to have her, in effect, outline prepared?
Of what, yes, of the guidelines that will be followed in approving any day trip. So do you accept that as an amendment?
I accept that amendment.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to read what I think we are now saying. The superintendent will present parameters for guidelines for field trips using all COVID safety measures.
Day trips.
At our next meeting.
Okay. Yeah. Is there? Art, you second that? Okay, and then Carrie Ann, any further discussion here?
Yes, please. I'm just thinking about some of the information that Amy just shared with us in terms of thinking about ventilation. And just as, you know, we're now officially into the fall season and the weathers are starting to get chillier. Beth, you had said that these field trips would be local. Could you just talk a little bit more about that in terms of like how far kids might be traveling on buses as it's getting colder where windows can't be open?
Well, the buses have to have the windows open anyway as part of protocol, but they would be, I think the original proposal we talked about was staying within Berkshire County. So, you know, we're transporting kids on buses now, but maybe we'd have to use a few more buses, whatever that would look like, but it would be local and where they could have space to either spread out when they get to the location and or, you know, be outside until they can't be outside. But as we know, there's been a lot of activities last year where kids spent time outside even when the weather got a little chillier. So, you know, but we would have those proposals. I'll have a proposal for you about what that looks like. That was our initial thought.
Thank you.
All right, can we vote on this motion?
I was just going to suggest that in answer to what Carrie Ann had brought up, that I have a lot of confidence that our superintendent, who is one of the most thorough people I've ever met in my life, will have that as part of her presentation when she puts that together.
Okay. All right, so. Okay, Kara.
Hi. Thanks for bringing up the field trips. I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about what besides the windows being down, like what the protocol is around different like capacity on the buses. Can you please be quiet? And if, you know, in terms of physical distancing between students.
So there are no distance requirements on the bus. The requirements for bus transportation is to have a mask on and windows open. Those are the only requirements for busing. We are doing our best to do assigned seating. So I'm assuming we try to do that everywhere that we're capable of doing that. But there's no, I just don't want to mislead anybody that it's not like there's specific distance requirements on buses.
All right, so let's take a vote here because we got a lot more on our.
Can I ask a question as well?
Is it really necessary?
It's a quick question. Thank you. Beth, in your presentation, can you also get the opinion of the our nurses that are supporting our efforts to communicate safe as well? Just so
again, so DPH and public health and the DESE gave us requirements. So none of that's going to change whether it's their opinion or, you know what I mean? Like that is our busing requirement. Oh, but you mean on how to do field trips?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Good. Yeah. I mean, we can do all that, but I think, you know, the protocols in place, like Amy said, have been going very well in schools, and I don't see us changing any of the things that we're requiring, even if we move around.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to vote on this motion that's been amended and the amendment's been approved.
No, we have to vote on the amendment and then we have to vote on the motion. Right.
Okay, so we're voting on the amendment, which is to present parameters for guidelines for field trips using all COVID safety measures at our next meeting. All right. So voting on that, Jeffrey?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Art?
Yes.
Carrie Ann?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Connie?
Yes.
And Jane, yes. Okay, so now we're voting on the full motion. Jeff?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Carrie Ann?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Art?
Yes.
Jane? Yes. Okay, so we're looking forward to some field trip information. So now on the unfinished business, I wanted to revisit in public here the memorandum of understanding with the units A, D, and E. I did send an email to the full committee, but perhaps the public is not aware that the vote that, according to our attorneys, two attorneys in the law office that supports us, the vote that we took in executive session to ratify the MOA was a vote of 6 yes, 1 no, 1 abstention. And then the second vote that we took in open session was actually not a legal vote, because the protocol is that once we've had an executive session with a vote, we come out of the session and report the vote to the public. It's been our practice to actually redo the vote so you can see how people vote. Unfortunately, there was a misunderstanding among some of the newer members, and I tried to advise that we weren't meant to be re-voting. So I just want to be clear that we did ratify the MOA, and so did the union earlier this week. And so I signed the MOA, and we have an agreement with the unions at this point. So I hope everybody is clear on how things went. I just want to point out that we have new members, and it's been very hard during this COVID time and very stressful 18 months of being on the committee. And the training and the protocols have not possible. Some people may not have had an opportunity to learn the ins and outs of the legal system with how we do contract negotiations and what happens in executive. Apologies for the public and to the members who didn't have the information that they needed. Now we're going on to, unless anybody else wants to add anything to that, I would like to go on. I'm very pleased. I want to thank the teachers for signing and for the work of the negotiation subcommittee, and also the good news, well, that every single staff member has checked in with Beth, and she might want to give a short report on that. It's not necessary.
Not right now, because the requirement was that everybody had reported prior to the 27th.
Yes, and that's happened.
And that's happened, so.
That's what I'm reporting. What you asked for has happened. So everybody who was not vaccinated has submitted either a medical or a religious exemption and is entered into pool testing. So I think we should, we've accomplished one of our goals. And the update on Dennis, yeah.
If I could just make a very quick comment along the lines of what was just said, that I would hope that, going back to your statement about, we have a number of people on the school committee who have not been on here a very long time and have not been through some of the experiences that others of us have. I would hope that some of those members, those newer members, are considering going to the November NASC, meeting. I would hope that some of those, because it's also available over Zoom this year, and that is that would be a very valuable exercise for the newer people to do.
Mm-hmm. I see your Carrie Ann's hand is up. I just want to respond to Dennis's statement that the law, the Massachusetts state law says that you need to have 8 hours of training in order, and a certificate from your town clerk that you've completed it in order to serve on the committee, and you have a year to complete that. There are certain things that the law requires that we know about, and I intend to help members to get the training they need. It can be at the conference, it can be on weekends, workshops. I am planning to bring in our legal team to do a personalized training for our committee on certain issues that I think are pressing. So what I want to make sure is that what you're doing adds up to credit for those 8 hours so that you can feel yourself an accredited member of the committee. Carrie Ann?
Thank you. I'm looking forward to going to any trainings that are possible and accessible. And Dennis, I appreciate you bringing them up. I just want to also add in the context that to participate in the full training requires taking off of work, because they're not just on the weekend, they are in the work week, and that is a financial hardship for some of us to consider. So it's not just as easy as going to the training as it may seem. And I appreciate all of Jane's efforts to make these trainings as accessible to all of us and finding the ways that we can access them online. It's very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the law does state that at no cost to the members, this training is at no cost to the members. So that implies that no loss of income. Loss of income is a cost, which I recognize. So I think as a body, we're going to try to be more conscientious about making sure that we all are on track. The business with the district member towns, I wanted, because we have another big issue to get to, one of the things I want to make sure you understand is that they've put together some surveys to get opinions from town people, from staff, from students. And I hope you're going to pay attention to what comes across in your email box or however it gets delivered. I'm hearing from some people, I only have a sample of like 3, so I don't want to say that I have a lot of, but I think it's a difficult survey for some people to keep track of because it makes assumptions that people know more about what's going on than they do. So one of the things that we all need to try to do is whenever we talk to people to make them aware as much as possible in as simple as a possible way what the work is that's going on now and how it's progressing. So every time we come to this item on the agenda, I feel really tired because we need to get onto our mask mandate, which is kind of the most important thing on our agenda.
Vaccination.
Yeah, I keep mixing it up, our vaccination mandate. So if there's anybody else who wants to add anything about the progress of the process that we're going through with the Regional School District Planning Board, I really feel remiss if we don't bring up certain issues. So anybody have any other thing to say?
I would just say pay attention.
Yeah.
Every single chance that you get, pay attention, because there's a lot going on, and I hope people will take a look at the website, watch there's a lot of meetings happening, and I know it's a big commitment because I attend every single one and I see several of the school committee members in every single one, but it is really, really important that people do what they can to attend and hear what's going on.
I think one comment that I want to say is I'm very disappointed that we originally came together as a couple of school districts to discuss educational issues, and this is basically a municipal operation of non-elected people, not representative of a cross-section of our communities who were involved in good faith trying to find best solutions for our districts, but it concerns me greatly that the school committees are marginalized in this work and that there is the representation on this planning board is rather limited. And Carrie Ann, would you like to say something?
I'd like to ask two questions. One is that when I was poking around on the regional school district planning board's website, trying to find the location of the recordings to try to catch up on some of what's been going on, it is like a mystery trying to find that information. And so just if there's ever an opportunity to like reflect that to Lucy or those that are in charge of that website, it would be really helpful because, you know, being able to like tune into a meeting while making dinner is like, it's a game changer. And then the other thing is that there are open spots for our school committee or could you just tell me what is the status of what are the open seats and the need for participation from us in that way?
Well, I would say that the open seat that I'm aware of is Monterey. And well, I can't speak for Laura Rodriguez, but she is going to become the representative from Monterey, and she was present at the last board meeting. So I don't think I'm wrong in assuming that at least she's considering representing Monterey. And that's true. Okay. Thank you. Public comment. Yeah, she's there. And so I think we will be fully represented. What I'm talking about is that the other people besides school committee folks are not necessarily very knowledgeable about our schools. So did you have two things to say?
That was the two.
At the two, and Bonnie.
Carrie Ann, the communications subcommittee is meeting tomorrow. So if you could send me, because I actually found it very easy to navigate. So if you can send me a couple of points, I will definitely bring it up at our subcommittee meeting.
What time is your meeting, Bonnie? So I know when to get it to by.
I think it's 4 o'clock.
Okay.
4 o'clock tomorrow. I will definitely bring it up. Thank
Okay.
you.
Great. All right. No other hands? So let's see, we're going to go, to my knowledge, we have two subcommittees that have met. One is policy, the other is community relations and public schools advocacy. So I'm going to go first to the policy subcommittee and turn it over to Dennis here.
Well, the policy subcommittee met to basically go over what was sent around as a new policy, which would be file G as in golf, B as in Baker, E as in Echo, B as in Baker, V as in Victor. And it's titled COVID-19 Staff Vaccination Requirement Policy. And this was sent around to everybody. So you should have it. And what we had decided in our meeting was that because it is possible for us to do, we wanted to accelerate this as fast as possible in order to be able to execute in a lot of the things that are in this policy by what was our target date? I think the 16th of October.
15th.
The 15th of October. I'm sorry. And so, and what we would do is, instead of following our normal practice, because it's not a policy, it's a practice of having a first read, and where you would then take the thing home and study it in depth, put it under your pillow and sleep on it for several nights, and then actually vote on it in the next full school committee meeting, that it was timely and really necessary for us to say, let's just do it as, in effect, both reads tonight. So the first read, in effect, was the fact that you got it, and you've had a chance, everybody that's here, to go over it and read it. And so that we will now, in effect, handle the rest of our discussion of it as a quote, second read, where we now, someone will take a motion, will make a motion to, we should have at this time, someone to make a motion to accept this policy. And then if that's seconded, we'll then have a discussion. And then eventually we'll vote on whether or not we want to, you know, take this as it is, make any changes to it or whatever. So is there a motion to accept this policy?
I make a motion to accept the COVID-19 staff vaccination requirement policy GBEBV.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, so now,
Sorry, this is the minute taker. I didn't catch who seconded the motion.
Loudland.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
And Jane, I really turn this now over to you.
yes, thank you, and I'm happy to entertain comments and suggestions. So I'm going to entertain Carrie Ann, I think your hand is up?
No.
No, okay, Jeff.
With regard to the comment earlier about people who witnessed the policy meeting, can you just elucidate what was the discussion around the N95 mask thing that was struck?
Yeah, well, we got a draft from Josh. He was working on something for another town. And they had, where we have masks, they had a KN95 mask specified, and we decided to strike that and keep to our policy as our mask policy, which is EBCFA. So that's one of the changes.
And that was a proposed policy. It was just a.
Yeah,
That
it was
wasn't
just
a
something-
past policy.
No, it wasn't, nobody's passed that policy. He just gave us a boilerplate, something to start with, and then thank you to Dennis for sort of marking it up for what we actually wanted to talk about. The date, we put that in, that was left out. I think we might have made very minor other changes, but it was pretty much what I think they were referring to was what type of mask we would require these people to have.
Yeah, and we, in our meeting, we basically took that out. That was in the original draft that our council sent to us. That was one of the things that in the policy subcommittee meeting that we basically eliminated.
And I think it's misleading to think that what Josh sent us was his idea of what we should do. It was just an easy thing for him to send off to us. So I don't think one should assume because it was in there that it was his recommendation we do that. You follow what I'm saying?
I understand.
Okay. So Jeff, go ahead.
In an effort to not delay getting a vaccine requirement into policy, I'm wondering, Beth, if it's possible as a heavy-handed education for our school community to understand why a KN95 mask is preferable to a cloth mask, and also the double masking that was suggested by Laura, and maybe just, sorry, it was Amy, sorry. Possibly like just doing more training, just heavy-handedly, like these are better masking options when choosing, and knowing that you're required to wear a mask and whatnot. It's separate from the policy, but it's just in a way to kind of push and encourage and make it very clear that there's a better mask option out there.
Well, I think when we redid the masking policy, we talked very specifically about making sure that it's an appropriate fit, you know, that we were much more detailed when we updated our masking policy going forward. I think the attempt, and again, this was a proposed policy, no one had adopted it, it was just a potential thought of what do you do if someone can't be vaccinated or, you know, whatever, at that moment or has an exemption. So the thought process was, you know, do you want to make that a different requirement? And I think the committee felt, I won't speak for them, but the consensus around that was that we had a strong mask policy that we had just gone through to update, and they felt comfortable that, you know, we were emphasizing that the appropriate fit.
My comment is not to the requirement, it's to the clear communication, because just because we have a policy doesn't mean that it's clearly communicated. So my question is more of, not related to policy, more of tactically, can we make an effort in the community to be very clear what our policy is, even making educating efforts of, you know, what we were brought to, just being reminded of why KN95 is better than other masks.
Not necessarily.
But it's that like an N95 is not appropriate if it's not properly
Right.
fitting your face.
Exactly.
But like to make sure that there are better choices. Double masking is better than not masking. And it's a best interest for themselves as well, not just like spreading disease, but also keeping themselves safe. So
It's all education and reminders, yes.
that was the spirit of my
Yes.
question. Okay.
It's also relationships, and judging from the fact that the MOA was passed, we're really working to, well, we always have had a feeling that we're working together as a community here, and just to, everybody's very frazzled right now, and everything that we can do to support each other in doing the best we possibly can is our aim. So I think I think that's what Beth has been doing all along. I see Bonnie and then you, Dennis.
Okay,
Bonnie?
a couple of things. This is just tiny. The paragraph that begins, any staff who are not fully vaccinated, the third line down, shall be required. You're missing the word to submit.
Yep.
And then my other two comments are, one, in the exemptions, I have to say, I'm not overly happy with approving the exemptions without the specifics. It just says the superintendent's office will provide additional information on the process for seeking an exemption. I liked when we had more specifics. So I don't think we should approve a policy that does not say that an exemption will require, whether it's a nurse, whether it's I don't know, whomever, and the superintendent. So that's my issue there. And my other issue is, I think, to be proactive in this, we should include a section on booster vaccines.
Okay,
Not me.
I think, well, Beth is gonna respond to that.
Well, I mean, I don't know about the booster piece that you guys can discuss amongst yourself. I would say that the advice would be to stick to this, and you can always add something else when that information actually becomes available. And but I would say that I just feel like there's a line between the school committee giving policy and then my role as a superintendent in making the decision on exemptions. And yes, it is still a personnel matter. And so, and I think there are, you know, I have to consult with legal or request more information based on the guidelines that are there. But I don't think submitting it to an outside nurse is process.
I just want to comment, I'm just going back to what DESE originally sent in its policies. It had suggested
They don't have a policy.
a method for approval. So that's the issue. And there, I also, on terms of the other with boosters, I thought that Josh could maybe just give us a sentence which would cover future changes to vaccine regimen.
I can ask if that,
Yeah, Jeffrey.
I think Beth covered it. First off, to your point, Bonnie, about the superintendent's office will provide additional information on the process for seeking an exemption. The state law says how you can provide a medical exemption with that. So, I mean, there's very clear guidance on that you probably don't need to be heavy-handed on that. And then I agree with the discussion on the booster. We should pick that up once we have more concrete evidence and not delay getting this into policy tonight as opposed to 2 weeks from now. At least we can still work on the booster language, but don't delay passing of this policy. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, I'd like to.
I think Carrie Ann had her hand up. Is there hand up?
Sorry.
Okay.
I just want to just say that that there was the comment during public comment about that our largest unvaccinated population is our students right now, and that while this is just to put into context that this is the first step of the policy committee, and that that we need to now take the next step of we've crafted a policy for our staff, but now we need to continue this work and now go back and think about the rest of our unvaccinated population.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. I'd like to start the vote. I don't see any other hands up. So this is a vote to approve the COVID-19 staff vaccine requirement policy with the addition of the word "to" between required and submit. Jeffrey?
Yes.
Art?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Bonnie?
No.
Okay, Carrie Ann?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Jane? Yes, and did I forget somebody?
That's it.
All right, so it looks like we have 6 yeses and 1 no on this, so the policy passes. And I want to thank the policy subcommittee for getting on this right away. And we will take into, seeing as you're on the policy subcommittee, Carrie Ann, I think you can easily bring it up with your chair to get this on the next meeting agenda for the policy subcommittee.
I will.
I have no doubt. And since you ran the Community Relations and Public School Advocacy Subcommittee today, would you just give a quick summary of what the discussion was about?
Sure. We had a short meeting before this one from 5 to 6 where we went over some of the content for the newsletter, and we looked at the format, and that this will be the first time that the school committee will be sending out a non-budget related newsletter to the full municipal community, not just our school community. And so we were thinking a bit about how that shifts our audience of the messages that we're wanting to get out. And we are in process, and we understand that any deadlines are self-imposed, unlike with the budget, where we have a very harsh deadline. And so we're trying to not necessarily rush it, but yet get it out and have it be what we want. So stay tuned.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think in my chairman's report, I think I already stated it in our talk about planning ahead, when I brought to your attention that our reorganization meeting is, we have 2 more working meetings and then a reorganization. And so be thinking about any changes you want to make and what subcommittees you might be on, whether you want to elect a new chair. I think you need to look at the work that we've been doing and what has meaning for you personally and what you're able to take on, because one of the things that's really important on subcommittees is that people are available who are on the committee. Because and if you be realistic about what you can take on. And I thank you so much for all the work that you do, because I know we all, it's been a long slog, and we want to get to the work of the committee beyond keeping kids safe with COVID. There's a lot of work that we had in mind that we would like to do. So thank you. I'm going to pass it on to the superintendent.
So a lot of what my written report will look like when it's completely finished tomorrow, and when we post it out is the information that we talked about with the public health and having the community opportunity to speak. So we'll be able to formally put that out tomorrow. The other piece that I had the opportunity to be interviewed for another colleague who is doing some research on their dissertation around the challenges of being a superintendent normally, plus COVID and what that would look like. But it also allowed me to do some research, and I saw an article this week on what it means to be a principal and or a director in these times. And I am so incredibly proud of how things have opened up this school year and the challenges that we face and how hard everybody is working. Teachers, all of the staff has been just incredible and has been flexible and has been making the changes we need and has been really working to make this experience as enjoyable as you possibly can while wearing masks and, you know, and all the other fun things that come with what we're doing right now. But I thought it was a really interesting article that I'm going to put a link to about it. It says principals, but I mean everybody when I say this is, you know, when we think about the health of teachers and students and the social emotional supports, we kind of forget about those in the district who are dealing with it themselves social emotionally, like a principal or a director. These people have been working around the clock nonstop, and it's not just their social emotional health and that of the family that they might have at home that we don't get to see very much, but also they have 320 children and their families. So they're responsible for all of that. So every once in a while, I just want us to be mindful of that when there's communications that sometimes happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and be thinking about that and make sure that everybody has some time to decompress, to reset, and to, you know, think about that when before you shoot off an email or, you know, and it's we all have to check ourselves on that. I am not a good example, and I've said this to the people who work for me, of work-life balance, and I don't want that for other people. So I just want us all to take a minute and think about that as we move forward, because everybody is really doing a great job. So that's all I wanted to share.
Thank you. And we have a report from the coordinator.
She's online today.
Oh, okay. So
there she is.
Oh, hi, Julie. It's your turn.
She is muted, but
I don't think she knows she's muted.
Unmute.
Unmute, please.
There we go. Yeah, there we go.
Please.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
That was
Sorry, I couldn't be there with you guys tonight, though I listened to you on my car ride and then fortunately made it to a final destination for my report. I put my report in your packet, and I'm sure you've all read it, but so currently in curriculum, our focus is on training and supporting our staff around the new math program as well as around analyzing all the data that we're going to be getting in at the end of the month and really using that data to drive our instruction and ensure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students, whether or not we're filling holes or whether or not we're accelerating their learning based on their abilities. So that is what we're doing on the curriculum front in a nutshell.
And Jeffrey has a question for you.
Actually, Julia.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, what's up? I spoke with several teachers, and especially about the math curriculum being new over several weeks. And like, I've heard feedback of like a little bit daunting at first, appreciative a day of curriculum development, but more could have been done. But I was really encouraged recently to hear that faculty it sounds like the teachers, the feedback I've gotten, it's only like a few, like 3 or 4, that are saying like they're encouraged by the early progress of it. And somebody even called out that you've made yourself very available to the troubleshoot and whatnot. And I just want to acknowledge you for that. And I think it's a major change. And I'm really excited about seeing what this yields, especially in math and STEM for us. So
thank you, Jeff. Yeah, and we've gotten, clearly mixed messages from staff as far as how much they like it or don't like it. But the one positive thing is that everybody wants to learn more about it. And so they're constantly asking me, when can we have more PD? So we do have PD lined up for them around math on October 8th and on November 9th, as well as I do try and get in and support as much as I possibly can. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, thank you. All right, and Sandy.
Hi, good evening. In the interest of providing you as much information as possible about a topic we're talking about a lot, our COVID-19 diagnostic testing, the pool testing, the routine testing was conducted for the first time yesterday. I think it's important for everybody to understand the number of meetings we attend throughout the course of a week. For example, I've attended 7 COVID-related meetings this week, and one of them today was a webinar held by DESE, and we were particularly talking about COVID testing. And as you heard from the superintendent, the process, they're using CIC as their vendor, is just like everything else in this country right now. They are low staff, especially healthcare workers. So it took us quite a period of time to get a program coordinator and ultimately be able to have ready contact with CIC. In fact, that's what the whole webinar was about today. They have now decided that they need more support, so they're working with 14 new subcontractors. You can certainly take a look on the DESE website and under the COVID-19 materials, and you'll see the recorded webinar or the slides from today if you'd like to take a look. But the good news is we do have a program coordinator. She's the nurse that came and helped yesterday to complete the pool testing. There is some lag time that they're working on between the portal, the CIC portal, and uploading the consents that are done electronically. And then they go to this site called Crush the Curve. Crush the Curve is where we get our consents and we can complete all the testing information. There is access to information on the CIC portal, but there's no way to record any of the testing. So we have to wait for those uploads to happen, and there was a lag time in that. And in fact, we found yesterday that there was a lag time on some of the consents that were actually completed electronically a couple of weeks ago. And we're trying to troubleshoot why that happened. But the rest of the whole process yesterday went very well. The nurses have been working very hard, and it is a stressful time, as we know, for everybody, but our healthcare workers are really trying their best, and they did a great job yesterday. We had all negative pools, so that was wonderful. The things that we can troubleshoot on, we're trying to. Just as a little note, I made it my job today to call CIC just to get a little additional support for our nurses. And I had my phone in my office going and my cell phone going. First call I was on for 87 minutes on hold. I just want everybody to understand like how long that went. I actually decided maybe I'll trick the system and put my cell phone going. So anyway, 42 minutes into that, I got down to the 87-minute call. So anyway, that's fine. We are working on it, but I just want everybody to know what the process is. I also went into the CIC website today to try to enroll as if I was enrolling a minor in the consent portal, and there's something that I thought was a little challenging, and we found that to be something that we experienced yesterday, the nurses, is that there is an opt-out box in the consent. It's also on the hard copy, but in the portal, there's an opt-out box. There's an opt-in, there's an opt-out. On the opt-out, it says, don't do anything else. You're opting out, fine, you're done, please leave. But what happens when you click the opt-out box is the whole demographic sheet comes up. So if you're not really in tune with exactly what that said as far as leaving the site at that point, you would fill it in. Therefore, you've just filled out like the consent form, but you're opting out. So there's some glitches. Everybody's aware of them. We're learning as we go. And I just wanted everybody to know how hard everybody is working to make sure that this is the best process for the school district and as safe as possible. And we are going to be conducting the test and stay now. We have support surrounding that. We were concerned that the number of students that would need to be tested and the fact that it takes approximately 15 minutes for each situation when we're doing the test might be a hardship, but we've gotten support from CIC now regarding that. Today during the meeting that I was on, there was some other ideas about how we might go about that if it does become a big challenge for us. We haven't had, we've had one case, as people are aware, so we'll see how this goes when we experience another one. But that is the main thing I wanted just to say tonight. The rest of this you can read. I was so happy to have our guy Alex on earlier and our two alumni, Carly and Grayson. That was just a wonderful experience for everybody. And I asked a couple of other students to come, and they were a little shy to be on camera. And Alex was too, but I thought he really stepped up.
Oh, he did. Great. Yeah.
And did a great job. So that's my report in a nutshell. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to do my best to answer them.
Okay, thank you. So, can you report next week and the next time we meet, like what the changes with the reporting? And I guess my question for today though is, it sounds like you can still get the tests, even if it's not posted to the website. We still have actionable information to be able to to do contract tracing and all that stuff.
Yes.
So by not getting results posted to the website, what is that preventing in terms of level of service, level of information that's getting to whom? Who's consuming it from the website?
So the two systems had to be communicating, right? So people were filling out the consent forms on the CIC website, and then they have to be uploaded to the Crush the Curve website for our nurses to be able to access and report testing. That did not happen at all, period, for us until last Tuesday, September 14th. So we weren't able to access any of we didn't know who consented. Okay. So we couldn't do that. And just so people understand, you can have a paper copy of the consent. That's absolutely fine. And in emergent situations, we are going to use them. But it's again a laborious act, and then it becomes the nurse's responsibility to upload. However, we talked today in our meeting, the state level meeting, that you could have a paper copy, you can have the portal, and you just have to make sure that you're bringing all that information together. So the other thing we can do, the nurses have offered, is to help parents actually complete the consent form online when they come in. So if there's a test and stay need, we would communicate with the families, and hopefully they could come in, and then a nurse could sit with them and get the consent form if the parent wanted to consent and had not already, in order for them to do the test and stay model. So that was really the lag. I think now, if you were to ask our nurses, you might get a little better reaction than you might have a couple of days ago, but we've got things worked out now, and we actually have a person to contact.
And is this like all schools that are using the CIC portal is experiencing this? So this
What
is a
we were told
statewide
today
issue?
was many.
Many.
That was many.
One size fits
Well,
all.
that's the state. We had a state meeting today where that was the topic of conversation. So clearly there's.
Yeah, okay, so Carrie Ann?
Thank you. Sandy, it was really great getting to hear about the camp this summer. So thank you so much for arranging that. In terms of the COVID stuff, I'm going to ask some elemental basic questions here for a second because I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of it. So in terms of the diagnostic testing, that then means so that if somebody, or can you just explain to me how that then gets used in the school? Is that for if a student or a staff member, if somebody is symptomatic, or if when does that come into play in our current system?
Okay, so the diagnostic testing, there's a symptomatic and diagnostic, and the routine testing is considered under the diagnostic, right? So if you're asking me, like, if you do the pools and a pool comes back positive, what's the next step?
Sure, I just don't understand. I don't know. So I need to understand.
So if there was a positive pool, we would be informed, and there's two things that could happen. We could have a double swab, which we're not doing yet because that's another layer of time that has to be built in. We're talking about if we're going to do that later on. But if we did a double swab at the time we do the pool, it would go to the lab, and if there was a positive test, they would already have the information there, and the lab would test it out, and they would figure out the individual, okay, that was positive, and then we would address it from there. If right now we're doing a single swab, so they would contact us, we would have to retest with Binax, that Binax now, to determine where the potential positive case was or cases were. And then there's the whole process again. If you were to look at all the protocols, you can see what the steps are. There's that flow chart, and there's if this, then that. So that's the diagnostic testing. The symptomatic testing is really kind of more basic because there's symptoms, and then you can do this. You can choose to quarantine, or you can choose to test, and then depending on what the outcome is, there's processes on the flow chart. Have you seen the flow chart? It's 3 pages. I think Beth shared it with you, and it's on the website. That's probably good things.
Thank you. And then how does this, there was some conversation, at least I think that there were in the letters that the school committee received about the test and stay policy. Can you say anything about that? And also then when Amy was speaking, she was talking about how that's like a current opt-in policy. Can you talk to me a little bit about where we stand with our test and stay?
So when the consent forms are completed, Jesse made it so that parents would be, if they're consenting, they are consenting to all 3 types of tests. Test and stay being one option. We had not been able to start the test and stay yet because of all the things I'd already told you. But what happens if the child's a close contact and asymptomatic, or if they had an exposure anywhere, and an in-school exposure of any sort, and they're asymptomatic, we could conduct the test and stay, which would include Binax now, and then ultimately potentially a PCR test. But the idea is the child's asymptomatic, you test each day for 7 days. If they remain negative, then fine. If it's positive, then obviously you go to the other processes, which would include the student going out and getting a PCR test. But the idea is if there's a close contact, asymptomatic, we do the test, they remain negative, they can stay in school. However, the requirement is if outside of school activities, because again, remember we've heard that school is considered a controlled environment. If outside school activities, they're supposed to quarantine. For school activities, and that includes school sanctioned activities outside of extracurriculars. There's another process for the weekend called EMED, which is a home test that the students, with the help of their parents, are required to perform. And then they have to show to their coach, or to whoever's in charge of the extracurricular activity. If it remains negative, again, the child can participate in that activity, and if it's positive, clearly not, and then you go to the next steps. So that's the test and stay. Keeping
Thank you.
kids in their programs is kind of the goal. Quarantining outside of anything that's a controlled environment.
All right, I see Bonnie, and I'd like to think about finishing the meeting in 3 minutes, which will be 8:30, so.
So Sandy, may come across as a really ignorant question, but is our entire student population tested?
No.
All testing is an opt-in.
Opt-in. They have, the
There's
parents
no
have to
opt-out.
sign consent. So parents have to opt in.
Okay, so what are the total numbers of our 600 and something who are being tested?
As of the other day, and this is not today, I want to be clear. I believe that this was as of Monday, maybe it was, I think it was Tuesday. We had 240.
240. So are all our other children who are not being tested at all what happens to them in terms of extracurriculars or all the other activities?
Nothing until they're symptomatic.
Right, nothing until they're symptomatic. But remember, those students who are vaccinated don't necessarily need to fall into like the full testing. I mean, they can sign up for it, but it's not as encouraged as much. Okay.
So the testing is really only for those 12 and older?
Really, it can be for any, but really what we'd like to focus on more are the 12 and younger, right? Because they're unvaccinated.
Right.
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 Okay.
I know, there's a lot of pieces.
Yeah, well, you can imagine if Sandy is spending, I'm looking like 30% of her time
maybe more
or
I would say
more,
like 50 or
just
60.
chasing around trying to make the pieces put together, that it makes a lot of sense that our brains on the committee are not working very well putting the pieces together because it's an awkward setup, but we'll keep working on it until and hopefully.
As a last part of it, Sandy or Beth, do we know why families are not opting in?
I mean, I think that's a personal choice. And I think that's.
We're trying to educate as much as possible. There are some parents feel like it's an experience they don't want their child to go through, but they have their own other options, available to them.
I mean, even when we talked about the potential of bringing a vaccination clinic in for the younger students, they're thinking about that, Amy and team that we were talking to, because why it might be, positive peer pressure when they're older. I like to say that, it's comforting. It might not be comforting for 5-year-olds to hear the other kid getting a shot next to them. So, they have to think about what that would look like. But we are trying to encourage education and opportunity wherever we can to make it happen.
Yeah.
I just recently heard a parent who didn't want to have their kid do a PCR test because they still thought it was the one that goes into the nasal cavity. And they have no clue that it's now changed, that it's just a gentle swab in the nose.
Right, so it's just a constant.
Totally.
Yeah, my granddaughter is 7. She said, well, I'm old enough to do it myself because I know what I'm doing.
Just give me that swab.
Sign her up first.
Sandy,
Yeah.
thank you for all of this work.
You're welcome. Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome.
So moved.
A motion to adjourn from Jeffrey.
Second.
Art. Okay, everybody seconded that. Okay. So it was Arthur officially, Carrie Ann,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Bonnie,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Art,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jane. Thank you all. And I say yes too. Thank you very much. And thank you to Chris, our silent partner over
Yes,
here, who
you're
keeps us
great,
on the
yeah.
straight and narrow.
Thank you.